What's up, metalheads? Welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I feel like I am being recognized for my rocker vibe.
Recognized for your rocker vibe? Oh, you a rocker, eh, fool? Does this feeling of recognition, Chris, have anything to do with how you're keeping your heavy metal street cred?
You know, I would like to think it has everything to do with my heavy metal street cred, or at least my subconscious recognizing my heavy metal street cred, because I had a very strange dream recently that I want to share with you.
All right.
So, in the dream...
Wait, let me get my notepad.
Yeah,
my
exactly.
Freudian notepad.
Yeah. In the dream, I was at a party, and I was talking to a few people, and there was this young woman walking around who, kept looking over at me, and I kept seeing her look at me, but she didn't come over to talk to me or anything like that.
All right.
So at the party, my brother shows up. The young woman goes and talks to my brother, and after talking to my brother for a bit, she comes rushing over to me and is like, "Hey, I knew I recognized you. You had asked me out in high school, but I wasn't ready to match your rocker vibe back then, but now I'm ready to match your rocker vibe, and I'm ready to go out with you now." And so I start going out with this girl. But what happens is I don't know who this girl is or what her name is. So I start going out with this girl, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, who is this girl? And I start thinking about the girls that I did ask out in high school, but some of them I still kept in touch with on social media, so it would be weird for them to be like, "Hey, I don't know if I recognize you." And ultimately I came to the conclusion that it was this girl who was in my gym class in 12th grade. Okay. So I start dating this girl under the assumption that's who she is.
Right.
So later in the dream, I'm talking to my parents, and I'm like, yeah, this girl is great. I really like dating her and all this and that, but I still don't know her name, and it's too late for me to ask her what her name is. You know, it would be too weird now for me to ask her name. So then she comes up to me, and we're talking for a bit, and a car drives by, and the only person in the car is a little boy in the back seat. And the car drives away, and my mystery girlfriend looks at the car and is like, "Oh no, my little brother just stole the cavity van," and runs off after the car. And so I chase after her to help her out, but in my head I'm thinking, okay, she just called that the cavity van, as in the van that belongs to the Cavity family. And for some reason I connected the Cavity family to the movie Matilda, and came to the conclusion that I am dating Mara Wilson, who played Matilda. Who I did not go to high school with. So we get to the car, she gets her brother out of the car, she's standing there with her brother, and I walk up to her, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm dating Mara Wilson, that's great. And then I woke up. So I never even confirmed that it was Mara Wilson.
Right.
But that was the conclusion I came to, that Mara Wilson decided to start going out with me because she liked my rocker vibe.
I love it. I love it. I love that Mara Wilson wanted to match your freak.
Yes.
And I thought that you had woken up and were going through who the fuck could this have been? I didn't realize that this was all within the confines of the dream.
Within the dream, I had those thoughts of who is this woman, and came to the conclusion that it was the girl in my 12th grade gym class. And then came to the conclusion, later figured out it was Mara Wilson. Maybe.
Okay. Maybe. You know what? I love those memes that are women telling us to follow our dreams, and it's women's dreams, and it's always something meaningful, and guys' dreams, it's one of those messed up AI generators.
Yes.
Just morphing everything into the weirdest fucking shit possible. Nothing makes sense. Everything is non-linear, and it's just hands are all fucked up.
Yes. Mara Wilson had 2 hands, each with 8 fingers on them.
Okay. It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. I like that. I love that she was willing to give the relationship a second chance.
Yes.
You know, you asked her out in high school, and she wasn't ready for it, Mara Wilson.
Yes.
And should we tag her in this? She's going to be like, what the fuck?
She's going to be like, who the fuck are these guys? It's apparently I asked you out in high school.
But I love that she was ready to give you a second chance at a later point in life. You know, thankfully for that party and thankfully for your brother, he obviously played the best wingman ever.
Clearly.
And talked you the fuck up. And a lot of times I find myself giving songs and even bands a second chance. We've talked a lot about how we both have a very gatekeeper, elitist history to our, music fandom.
Yes.
And now being older and slightly more mature, we're a little bit more open to some bands that we might not have liked in the past or songs that we didn't like in the past, just our constant skips. And that's what we're going to be talking about this episode, second chance songs. Songs that we were able to go back now with a clearer mind and a more developed palate and appreciate more than we did when we were younger elitists and metal purists. So, Chris, I'm super excited to do this because I was kind of surprised by the list that I came up with. You may have had a little bit of an influence in some of my selections here, but are you excited to get into our second chance songs?
I am excited to get into our discussion of second chance songs. When you brought this topic up, I was admittedly a little hesitant because I'm like, I think I can come up with songs. Really what I took the approach of is not so much songs that I skipped, but songs that I just was like, or bands in general that I was just kind of like, I don't know if I really need to like dive too much into this. And then when I finally made the decision to dive in, I realized, fuck, I've been missing out. So that's kind of the approach I took, and I'm very excited to talk about these bands and these songs and how, sometimes the first impression isn't the best impression. And then when you give something that second opportunity and you're like, hey, let me revisit that first song that I got, that first impression that I got, you realize, actually, this band is amazing, and I'm going to make my entire personality about loving this band.
That's what was kind of, I guess, the starting point for the idea that I had was like, are there bands out there that I vehemently, talked shit about in high school, that I then, later went back to listen to, and I was like, actually, this is really fucking good. And I think a lot of it came from having such a stark belief system with my metal taste, especially in the early days, which is so odd because I came up in the era of nu metal, like what at the time was considered the least metal of heavy metal. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where it was like melting in all these different influences, and it wasn't thrash, it wasn't death metal. It was like the weirdest melting pot of genres. But because I came up within that era, I then just formed these really strict ideas, some about older bands, some about bands that had come out around that same time as well. It was just like, it's so funny revisiting what your taste is when you're 13 or 14 years old and now being older and being like, why the fuck didn't I just, like, if I had just let the song play a little bit longer, it would have been fine. So enough of us blabbing. Chris, why don't you start off with your first second chance song or second chance band even?
So the first band I actually want to talk about, I believe it's a band I've talked about quite a bit on this podcast. That's the band Weezer.
Okay.
Right now I am a big fan of Weezer. I like a lot of their music. Celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Blue Album, which is crazy. They're releasing, I just saw this and people are like making fun of it, but also talking about how cool it is. They're releasing like a vinyl box set, deluxe box set with the Blue Album that's in a sweater that you can pull on the thread and undo the sweater on it. So that's pretty cool that they have that. But yeah, Weezer is a band that, like, I remember seeing the music videos for Hash Pipe and Island in the Sun on Much Music USA, and I liked those songs. I liked the song, Beverly Hills, but like I didn't really get into anything else. I think we did get the Blue Album at the often talked about story that I have where we went to my dad's job and bought like 30 albums from the employee bookstore. I believe Blue Album was one of them. And my brother got really into the Blue Album and was really listening to that album a lot. And I wasn't really as into it. Eventually, I listened to Make Believe, which has Beverly Hills, Perfect Situation, you know, songs like that a lot of Weezer fans really don't like. But it was stuff that I got into. And then eventually I made my way to the Blue Album and listened to the Blue Album. And that's when I was finally like, oh, wow, like now I get it.
Yeah.
But then I listened to an album like Pinkerton, which is very different from the Blue Album and is very weird. And, you know, songs like Get You, Tired of Sex, El Scorcho, these are songs that kind of had a weird feel and a weird sound to them. And at first I was like, wait, this is the same fucking band? And then was like, after listening to the album a couple times, I'm like, no, this is actually pretty good. And I had a similar reaction to The Greatest Man Who Ever Lived, which is a song I love. I heard snippets of the song in a project that one of the other students at Five Towns was working on. And it was just the chorus of them, well, not the chorus, but the part where they're repeating, I'm the greatest man that ever lived. I'm like, that sounds like a funny-ass song. Let me listen to it. And I listened to it, and it's this weird song where it changes genre every, 25 seconds. So I didn't like it at first, but then eventually got really into it. So to kind of set the table of how I approached this episode, Weezer is a band that it took me multiple listens and multiple approaches of songs I had heard in the past to finally appreciate what I was listening to. But then once I did appreciate it, like I love Weezer. Like I love so much of their music. Like I said, I know I've talked about it here on the podcast. I'll listen to them all the time. And yeah, that was just the first band that kind of came to mind as a band that was like, I eventually got really into them, but it took a lot of listening to songs that I didn't immediately like before I finally got there.
Okay. All right. So like, what do you think it is that really, because you got your taste of them on the Blue Album and you knew like the big hits from, I guess when we were coming up. Hash Pipe and Island in the Sun. Because I remember Hash Pipe being the first time that I like heard the name Weezer and watched the music video, and I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool riff. And then hearing the rest of their music, and I'm like, this doesn't sound anything like the rest of their stuff. What the fuck is this? But what do you think it was about Pinkerton that made you go, okay, Blue Album was cool, but there's more to this band?
So Blue Album is very much just like, I feel like it's referred to as garage rock in the way that it is fuzzy college, like sounding like a college band or like a garage band, fuzzy guitars, relatively basic riffs, and singing about some like nerdy shit. And then with Pinkerton, they got a little bit more experimental with the sound. I don't want to say experimental, but there's a lot more of like letting feedback start off the song, or coming in with like, instead of just like a straight up like riff where he's just strumming the riff, he's like doing weird arpeggios, and there's a lot more like using like acoustic guitars and like experimenting with the melodies a little bit and really leaning into being like the pathetic lyrics.
Right.
And so I think it was a bit of a departure from the Blue Album. But then after listening to it multiple times, it's like, actually, I can hear how this is almost like a progression of what the band was on the Blue Album. It's and I think a part of what's weird about Pinkerton also is that Rivers took a lot more control over the band in Pinkerton. With the Blue Album, it seemed like it was a little bit more collaborative. With Pinkerton, he was very much like, no, I want to be a rock star.
Right.
And we're going to make this album that's going to make us all rock stars. And I'm going to be an artist who, no, I'm going to tell the label we're not releasing a single. We're not releasing a music video. We're going to let the album speak for itself. And I'm going to go on tour. And I'm going to have sex with all the groupies. And I'm going to live my rock star dreams. Yeah. And I think Rivers went from like writing this great college rock, garage rock band to being like, oh, we got famous. Now I'm going to be the eccentric rock star who writes some little bit weirder music.
Yeah.
that ultimately is still really good. And I think there is a part of him that's a little bit embarrassed by that music because fans fell in love with the song El Scorcho. And apparently for a long time, Rivers would be like, hey guys, this next song is called El Scorcho at live shows, and fans would go nuts. And then they'd play a completely different song because he knew that fans liked the song and he was just like fucking with them. Because then you get to the Green album.
Yeah.
Right? Green album came next. I believe Green album came next after Pinkerton. And that has Hash Pipe. And that kind of went back to the Blue album sound.
Right.
So it's Pinkerton was a departure, and I think it was Rivers' first time experimenting with trying something new and being the eccentric rock star. And at the time, it didn't really work. I think as a fan base, Weezer fans have a greater appreciation for that album than it had at the time. So I think as a fan base, Pinkerton has also gotten a second chance. But yeah, I think it was too much of a departure too quickly. But ultimately, when you go back and listen to it, it's actually really good.
See, like, it's funny because my first choice feels like there was no departure in sound, but it was just my own judgment, my own feelings. Like, the album should have been over already. Why am I listening to this very last song? This feels a little bit more whiny than the rest of the songs, which it's really not by comparison. It's very much so on theme and cohesive when you consider the album as a whole. But I just refused to listen to it. And for the longest time, whenever I put this album on, I would not listen to this closing track. Until one day I just finally was like, whatever. I was in the car, I think, with my dad, and I was like, whatever, just let me just let it play. And I was like, what the fuck? This song is incredible. And that's the song Pushing Me Away by Linkin Park. This is the closing track on Hybrid Theory. And so when I say that this wasn't really a departure from anything else, it felt like a good, listening to it now, it's a great closing track. Because it has that emotional side, it has the vulnerability in the vocals, in the vocal performance from Chester Bennington. But for some reason, I was like, this is a whiny song. I don't like this. This is bordering on emo, maybe.
Yeah.
And I don't like where this song is going. Meanwhile, you had In the End and Crawling, which were just as emotional, just as vulnerable. And just as, if you want to call it whiny, right? Because that was my take on it. I was like, why am I listening to this song? And mind you, this was one of my favorite albums at the time. I don't know what it was. I honestly, especially considering a lot of the other bands that I grew up listening to, when you think about like Korn, right? We've talked about Jonathan Davis's vocal style and how it's that sort of whiny, depressed sounding, like very frail sounding vocal style when he's singing clean, where Chester had a more power and more delivery to his voice. He just didn't have that type of color that Jonathan Davis was putting on it. But I was fine listening to Korn, whine on a song like Clown or whatever, and for some reason, though, this song just pissed me off. And it starts out beautiful. It starts out like, it sounds like raindrops and like these harmonics that start everything off, and then the riff kicks in. The verse is very standard Linkin Park, like, let's have a cool, like, sort of synthy thing going on in the background. Chester singing clean, and then Mike Shinoda comes in with "Caught in the Undertow," still caught in the undertow, which I love all the memes about. Like, why do metal bands love talking about the undertow so much? It's not the undertow that gets you, it's actually the riptide. Everyone should be singing about the fucking riptide instead. But yeah, and then it's like this huge chorus, and for whatever reason, I just would always just stop the album. That was it. I don't want to hear this song. I don't like it. Within the first 5 seconds, I was like, nope, I don't need to listen to this. Until one day I just finally let it play out, and my eyes were open. My ears finally let me accept what the song was trying to say, and now it's become one of my very favorite songs. And that's what I'm talking about, is like being able to just kind of get out of your own way and say like, oh, this is way better than I gave it credit for initially. I don't know. Like, it's so odd to me as well because it was one of my favorite albums at the time from one of my favorite bands at the time. Are you familiar with this track? I know that you're a fan of the Hybrid Theory album, but I don't know if you felt the same way with any of the other songs on that album as I did with Pushing Me Away.
It's funny because there's this part of me that did struggle with this episode because we've talked about listening to entire albums and appreciating entire albums, and I am someone who, as I think about it, kind of early on has always tried to listen to entire albums. Like, once I'd started discovering my own music, once I discovered Sum 41, I listened to the entire album. I didn't only listen to the tracks that were singles or had music videos. I listened to the entire album. Same thing with Linkin Park. When Hybrid Theory came out, I listened to that entire album. And Pushing Me Away, the title sounded familiar. I couldn't place which song it was. Once you said Caught in the Undertow, I was like, oh, yes, I remember that song. I love that song. That's a great song. So I think I think that's why my approach was bands, because for me, there were very rarely times where I skipped songs on albums. And the only song I can think of that I routinely skipped at that time was, I believe, Purify on Saint Anger.
Okay.
I would listen to every other fucking song on that album.
Right.
But Purify, I was like, no, this song is bad. I'm not going to listen to that song. And the meanwhile, I'm listening to the other, 10 songs on that album, 11 songs on that album. But,
so is that your next choice? Is that your next pick?
I'm actually a huge fan of Purify now. That's now actually the only song on that album I'll listen to. But no, yeah, it was interesting to hear you mention Linkin Park. Like I said, it was fun to go through this and try and figure out, okay, what am I going to talk about?
Right. And on that topic, what are you talking about next?
So the next band, similar to Weezer, is a band that I believe I've brought up before and I am a big fan of now. That's the band The Bouncing Souls. Okay. I had heard Manthem in, I believe, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. And...
as one does.
Yes. And I remember having, like, Napster when it wasn't, like, illegally downloading the music anymore or something.
Right, yeah.
And I was looking for The Bouncing Souls, and I was looking for the album that had Manthem. And that album, for whatever reason, wasn't available or wasn't on there, or I couldn't find it. So I just never listened to The Bouncing Souls because I was like, well, I can't find the album that has the one song I know I like. So I'd rather start with that album than start with an album with, like, no songs that I don't even know if I like it or not.
Right.
My brother did listen to some of those albums and got really into The Bouncing Souls and eventually convinced me to listen to The Bouncing Souls. But it did take me a very long time because, like I said, I was looking for the album with Manthem, which I believe is How I Spent My Summer Vacation, and I couldn't find it. All I could find was their earlier stuff, albums like, Hopeless Romantic, Maniacal Laughter, their self-titled The Bouncing Souls. My brother was listening to that, and he would talk about songs like Lamar Vinoy. And, songs like Cracked or Kate is Great. And I still wasn't listening to it. And it wasn't until I eventually was like, all right, let me just fucking listen to these albums. And like, I immediately fell in love with them because it was punk rock music. They were doing their best SoCal punk rock music. And so it wasn't that I didn't like it because they were trying something different, like what, Weezer was kind of doing where, the band changes a little bit and that infuriates the fan base.
Right.
Going back to The Bouncing Souls, the album How I Spent My Summer Vacation is honestly closer to pop punk than their like self-titled album or Maniacal Laughter, where it sounds like, they're from the East Coast, but it sounds like SoCal punk, Okay. And that's kind of the sound they were going for. So it wasn't even like I don't like this music. It was just, I didn't give it a chance because I didn't know what any of the songs were. because
Right.
at the time, if I'm listening to an album, I want to know that there's at least one good song on the album. Even though I was listening to entire albums, I guess it was kind of like if I know I like one song on the album and they consistently write other songs like that, then I'm probably going to like the album. You know, that was the problem with the Ataris. I really liked the song 13, and so I bought that album, and it turns out the other like 15 songs on the album suck. And that's the only good song on the album. So I've been burned by that trail of thought before.
Got it.
But yeah, with the Bouncing Souls, it was just, I kept putting it off, and then was finally like, fine, I'll listen to Maniacal Laughter. And I was like, fuck, these songs are awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So it's I feel like it's the cohesion that you get listening to or trying to go through a band's discography that had helped you to kind of give bands a second chance. Right?
Yes.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think, especially with Weezer and the Bouncing Souls in these specific contexts, it was, I liked something, I found something I liked within their discography, and then was finally like, okay, people have been talking about this other stuff. If I love the stuff that the fans are like, hey, that's not even their best stuff,
Right.
then obviously I'm going to like what is their best stuff. Because that's how I discovered Metallica. I heard I Disappear in Saint Anger, and it took like dozens of people telling me, Chris, you are listening to the worst music Metallica has ever created. You're going to love the first 4 albums. Listen to anything off of those first 4 albums, and you will fall in love with this band. And then I finally did, because like I said, there was this one girl who like was the epitome of like basic white girl. And she saw me listening to Saint Anger, and she was like, Chris, you can't listen to that album. Like, that's a bad album. You need to listen to the stuff before the Black Album. I'm like, shit, I'm sitting here in a fucking, at the time I was probably wearing like a Pantera or Slayer t-shirt. I got my long hair, and the girl who shops exclusively at PacSun is telling me that I need to listen to, Master of Puppets. Like, shit, I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And finally listened to it. And so, yes, there is very much a theme here of liking a band's newer stuff and realizing if I like the new stuff and hardcore fans are saying their new stuff is not as good as their old stuff, which every fan is going to fucking say.
Right.
Like if I love this stuff so much that other fans are saying isn't even supposed to be good, maybe I should listen to that old stuff. And so that's how I've started listening to these bands.
See, I feel like for me, the theme is that I have no patience is my theme. I will hear the first 5 seconds of a song and immediately just be like, no, I'm not listening to this. This is going to be a forever skip. I'm never listening to this song. I'm never giving this song a chance. That's how I was with the song Baby Driver off of Kiss's Rock and Roll Over. I would just never, ever listen to this song because it would start out with the bump, 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 and I just like skip on to the next. I don't know what it is that triggers me so much about specific chord progressions or melodic themes or just riffs in general, where I'll hear it and just go, nah, this is not for me. I'm not going to dig this at all. And again, it took me listening to the album as a whole. I probably talked about it before, as any 2000s middle schooler would do. If I wanted to sit for an afternoon and draw some Dragon Ball Z characters, I'd grab my Walkman and throw a CD on and just listen to that for the whole afternoon.
Yep.
So that's what I was doing one afternoon. I had Rock and Roll Over on, Baby Driver comes on, and I'm like, oh, okay. I let it play for like 10 seconds instead of 5. And I was like, all right, this song is kind of cool. And it might have even just been the title. It might have even just been the title Baby Driver. I'm like, what the fuck is a baby driver? Why? What does this song mean? What is this? And just in my confusion, I just completely wrote the song off. Mind you, I love a bunch of other dumb songs from Kiss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at the time, I think I had like their Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits album.
Yeah.
Like their best of CD. And, you know, Dr. Love. Dr. Love is arguably a very dumb song and starts out a similar way as Baby Driver. But for, again, whatever reason, whether it's the title or just the way the riff sounded in my head at the time, I just did not like it. And I'm glad. I feel like I was made whole once I finally accepted Baby Driver into my life as my Lord and Savior. So, Chris, why don't you... You just imagine like going into your grandma's house and she's got like a portrait of Paul Stanley. Chris, what's your next selection for second chance bands?
So the next song I want to talk about is, I wouldn't say I'm a fan of the song now either.
Okay.
But there's a funny story to tell about the song that I figured I'd share.
All right.
So the song I'm going to talk about is Sugar We're Going Down by Fall Out Boy. Now,
okay.
in high school, at my gatekeepiest, Fall Out Boy was one of my favorite targets and bands to pick on and make fun of and like fuck up their name and all this and that. You know, I hated Fall Out Boy. So yeah, I graduate high school. I go about my life never thinking about Fall Out Boy again, except to insult them. And then like one day I was like watching YouTube videos and there's this YouTuber Stevie T who did a video making fun of like the guy's singing voice and like mimicking what it sounds like he's saying, not what the actual lyrics are. And so I was like, haha, he's making fun of the song. It's kind of catchy, but haha, it's funny. And then at my friend Chang's wedding, I was in the wedding party. We're all on the dance floor. And like we've talked about before, you know, we've gone from like having these like older songs from like the 70s or the 80s being played at weddings to now it's like 2000s emo and pop punk is being played at these weddings. So we're all on the dance floor and like me and my brother who listen to all of this thrash and death metal and black metal and all this and that are dancing along to Sugar We're Going Down by Fall Out Boy. And I think my brother was actually singing along. I still don't know the lyrics. I only know Stevie T's lyrics. I still don't know the lyrics, but like I'm dancing to it. And either my friend Chang or his brother posted a picture on Instagram of everyone dancing in the on the dance floor. And I had this like weird face where like I looked like angry or something, or I looked like I was like confused. And so what I did was I took the picture, took a screenshot, circled it, put it back into the like bridal party group chat that we were all in, and was like, POV, you realize you're dancing to Fall Out Boy after insulting them your entire life. And like, so that's kind of the way it is that it's like, it's not my preferred style of music. I will never go out of my way to listen to Sugar We're Going Down.
Right.
But if it comes on, I'm probably not going to complain about it, at least not out loud. But like, yeah, it's not for me. It's still not for me. But I thought that was a funny story, how I'm like, 20 years ago, I would have been throwing a temper tantrum and like threatening to punch people in the face if I heard this fucking song.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, actually, it's kind of funny that I ever hated this band that much.
I get that way with Mr. Brightside. I hate Fall Out Boy. I still do. It's very much, that's a band that I don't think I'll ever be able to give a second chance to. I hate the song titles. I have never been able to connect with the music. I don't like Patrick Stump's voice. It's not for me.
Yeah.
But the only song that I get angrier about is Mr. Brightside. And anytime it plays at a wedding or a party or whatever, I look around me and I see just people enjoying life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wish that could be me. I wish this song could elicit that reaction from me. Same thing with Sweet Caroline. Fucking hate Sweet Caroline. Every block party I've ever been to, every Sweet 16 I've ever attended, you know, it's just a bunch of people singing along to this. And I'm like, I don't understand. This song is awful. Why are we singing this? Why are we playing this at sporting events? Why?
It's
I don't get it.
Yeah, I feel like the Sweet Caroline, I think, started at in Boston with the Red Sox, and then I think other teams took it. But like, what's funny about those two songs is that there is a cover by Me First and the Gimme Gimmes of Sweet Caroline that I really enjoy, so that's a lot of fun. And with Mr. Brightside by The Killers, I like Robin Adele Anderson's cover of it, and I've listened to that way more than I've listened to the original, and I feel like I have a better appreciation for the original because of how much I love Robin Adele Anderson's cover.
Okay.
Because, like, before hearing her version, I had no interest in this fucking song.
Yeah.
But then I heard her do it, and it sounded great. She had another singer with her. Oh, I forget his name, but it was a duet with a guy on there. I always want to say Von Miller, but I'm like, no, that's a football player. But yeah, I love her cover of it, and so I like the song for those reasons. But similarly, at this wedding, all the girls went crazy when Mr. Brightside came on. That and what's the other fucking song? What's it? I don't write sins, I write tragedies. You know, haven't you people ever heard of Closing the Goddamn Door?
Closing the Goddamn Door.
Like, these millennial girls fucking love those two songs. Like, those are their two favorite songs. And it's hilarious to hear an entire bridal party shouting their lungs out to these songs at the wedding.
It's really funny. This goes back to the tiny bit of gatekeeper attitude that still lives within me, where whenever someone sends me a reel of like, oh, you know, when that classic emo hit comes on and you're an elder millennial, like an elder emo now, and I have to resist the temptation to respond like, I'm not emo. I never listened to this emo music. I never liked emo music. I can't relate to your nostalgia for Fall Out Boy or Panic at the Disco.
Yeah.
And instead, I just react with a laugh, you know, the little laugh emoji, and just go about my day. Because I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to ruin this person's day being like, wow, John's a dick.
Yeah.
Why did he have to answer me like that? Like, just fucking relax. It's just an Instagram reel. But yeah, I do not have any nostalgia in my heart for those songs. I understand that they elicit that reaction from people and that people have that connection to it. But like, that's like for me at my friend Amanda's wedding, when her and her husband got married, they played System of a Down at the wedding. They played Limp Bizkit and they played 9 Inch Nails, and that's what all of us were singing. So that's like, it depends on, you know, whatever that music was for you at that within those formative years.
Yeah.
You play that at a fucking wedding and the floor is going to erupt.
Yes.
So for my next selection, I was gonna mention the song "She Rides" by Danzig, and I want to give that as like a special shout out, like an honorary mention. But I feel like it's the same feel as "Baby Driver." I had the same problem with it, where I was like, "This is starting too slow. Skip." And so I do want to shout that song out because that's a phenomenal fucking song. My friend Mike always says that is the ultimate stripper anthem, that he just wants to be able to go to a strip club and see a girl dancing to "She Rides" by Danzig. But I felt it might be a little bit more interesting to talk about a band that you had turned me on to, Chris. And when I finally gave him a chance, I realized that the music is way more up my alley than I ever gave it credit for. And it's probably to do with the way that I first heard this band. So back when I was 13 or 14, the old CKY home movies, like, you know, CKY 1, 2, 3, whatever, Bam Margera and his whole crew, what's his name, Brandon DiCamillo, Rab himself, like all these guys just getting together and acting like jackasses. Yes. No pun intended. And like, you know, he would play music within those, a lot of CKY. And Bam as as everyone knows, is a huge fan of the band Him.
Yep.
So the first time I ever heard Him was the song Wings of a Butterfly, I think. And like the music video, I think he had the music video in one of those CKY tapes. And I heard the intro and I was like, this is really good. And then it got to his voice and I was like, oh, this is no longer really good. And so I wrote them off for forever. And then, and this is how much of a dick I was and can still sometimes be, by seeing just how passionate young women were about this band, I was like, fuck this band. I don't want to give him a chance at all. That's a chick band, and he's fake goth, and it's fake rock, and blah, 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 blah. Then we start this podcast, and Chris starts talking about how much he loves Him, and how Him is actually like, it's way better than you might think if you actually just give it a shot.
Yep.
So I go back, and I think this was around the time of the goth deep dive that we did. And I start listening to a bunch of the songs that you had mentioned, a bunch of the stuff that we had on our companion playlist for that episode, and start just doing a deeper dive. And I was like, oh, shit. I'm going to have to eat my words here because this is all exactly the type of stuff that I like. It's like a softer typo negative.
Yes.
It's like a even the song, I think it's Right Here in My Arms, starts out with like a cool drum groove. I think that's the one that starts out that way. And it sounds a lot like The Cult. And I love The Cult. So I was like, why don't I just give this a chance? And I went about, the rest of that day listening to song after song after song. And I was like, God damn it. Here I was talking shit about this band for all these years, making fun of people who like them, and it's actually exactly right, my exact brand of moody, gloomy, gothy rock. I love it. So, yeah, thank you for turning me on to Him. This was one of the more surprising, like, about faces that I had.
Yeah.
With my that staunch attitude that I had about him from the very start, because it's just like, I don't know if I was simultaneously annoyed by how much Bam Margera just plastered the heartogram over everything too. Yeah, that's probably a lot to do with it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just like with anything else that Bam Margera did, just once you see him once, it's once too many times, I think. But yeah, thankfully I was able to kind of give him a second chance and actually discover a lot more stuff that I really liked. How does that feel? Do you feel vindicated, or do you feel a sense of victory knowing that you introduced me to a band where it was like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is exactly the type of stuff that you like to listen to.
Yes.
Why don't you like this band?
Yes. Vindication. Yes. It's funny because you mention Wings of a Butterfly, which like is a song that I feel like I'm not super familiar with. I am most familiar with the two albums, Love Metal and Razorblade Romance. And so that almost feels like I'm on the other side of, my Metallica experience, where you're saying, I hate this fucking song for, these reasons, and I hate this band for these reasons, which like, okay, I get that. A lot of people hate CKY and Him because of their association with Bam Margera.
Yeah.
But for me, it is very much like, no, you've got to listen to the songs off of Razorblade Romance. You've got to listen to the songs off of Love Metal. That's some of their best stuff. That's my favorite stuff from them. So it's great to see that me talking about them and talking about the songs that I like and the albums that I like. It was, you're 100% right. It is a easier to digest typo negative. It is typo negative for people who don't want to listen to an actual vampire play this scary sounding music. If you want to hear some Finnish dudes play some like kind of cheesy, love metal, Him is for you. If you want to hear, if you want to be seduced by a 7 foot tall vampire, listen to typo negative.
I don't know. Both of them sound kind of cool, depending on the day of the week, I guess. They are like a heavier Cure or a lighter Typo Negative. They sit somewhere within that spectrum, and that's what's so cool about them is that during our goth deep dive, you were like, none of this music makes sense to me. It all sounds like 80s pop with gloomier vocals.
Yeah.
But then you have him who is like, it's rock with the gloomier goth influences.
Yeah.
And that's what ticked me off to, where I was like, all right, maybe I got to go back and just give this dude another chance. And you were right. You were right. Why don't you tell me another fucking band that you're right about, Chris? Go ahead, fucking throw it in my face. Let me know where else I was wrong in life.
So this next band I want to talk about, this is actually a story I've told before, and I won't be convincing you of anything because I know you're already a fan of this band. And that's actually the band Anvil. You know,
okay.
I told the story in our Cursed Bands episode that my first exposure to Anvil was them performing on The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien. And at the time, I wasn't ready to be a fan of Anvil because at the time, I seem to remember trying to find the fastest thrash metal and stuff like that, and I wasn't ready to listen to a band who was embracing a sound that I absolutely love now,
right?
Which is that late 70s, early 80s heavy metal sound. You know, at the time, I was very much into Slayer. This was me at my Slayer is above all gatekeepiest of my life. So that was the music I wanted to hear, and at the time I wasn't ready to listen to Anvil, and it wasn't until later on, and then eventually doing that Cursed Bands episode where I'm listening to Anvil, I'm listening to the album Metal on Metal, and I'm like, these songs are fucking great. Like, I wish I had been listening to this band since I saw them on The Tonight Show, because this music is awesome, and I love this music. And so that was another story that came to mind, is just my, the approach that I was taking to music when the band was introduced to me was not the music I was looking for. As I got older, and all of a sudden I'm like, actually, Thin Lizzy and Boston are the greatest rock bands ever. And, I'm very much focused on wanting to hear cool 1970s guitars playing like heavy metal riffs and wanting to hear what influenced the bands that I already love. That's when I was finally ready to listen to Anvil. So I think Anvil was a band that I definitely had to give a second chance to, because when I was first introduced to them, I was like, this isn't for me at that time. 15 years later, I'm like, okay, I get it now. I get it now. I should have always loved this band. And at least now I get to appreciate how much I love Anvil and how much everyone loves Anvil. Like we said in our Cursed Bands episode, in that documentary about Anvil, so many artists coming out and saying, yeah, we all idolize these guys. These guys are tremendous musicians, and we talked about it in the episode. They could have found individual success on their own if they had just split up the band and joined other bands. They would have been massive. And instead, they insisted on, no, we started Anvil with the goal of making Anvil a great metal band. We're going to be successful and a successful metal band as Anvil.
It's what made them so endearing, is that they stuck to their guns.
Yeah.
And through everything that they'd been through, all mentioned in that Cursed Bands episode. Definitely check that one out if you haven't.
Definitely.
But it makes them, it makes them relatable. It makes them the everyman sort of band, where it's like, everyone wants to start a project and see it through and see it be successful. And like, to see a band who is so easily compared to Spinal Tap, constantly being called the real life Spinal Tap. It's endearing to see that they stuck it through, and that they made it out the other side, and did eventually find their audience and did find some more success and some widespread notoriety. Whether that was just kind of people laughing along with them or laughing at them, but eventually they got to actually listen to them and realize like, oh shit, they are the real deal.
Yeah.
You know, that's what made the difference. But yeah, I think it's cool too to be able to go back and hear the DNA of the other bands that you love in an earlier band that just didn't get the recognition that they had deserved. That's what makes Anvil so cool.
Yep.
You know, like we constantly hear about Diamond Head and how much they influenced James Hetfield, but people fail to mention like Anvil was also around at that time, and like you said, in the documentary, they are Slash is on there, Scott Ian is on there, like they're all talking about like, yeah, we fucking loved them, we idolized them, we wanted to sound like them, and that's what influenced us, and we took little bits and pieces of what worked from their music and injected it into our own stuff.
Yep.
And that's always really cool to see. I love that it was the performance like a late night show.
Yeah.
Pretty much, which seems so outside of the realm of what they probably ever imagined themselves being on.
Oh,
right?
yeah, definitely. Like you could tell Lips was having the time of his life on that stage. Like it was so awesome to watch, and like you're saying, it's so awesome to watch, and especially like anytime a metal band gets to perform on late night, it's fucking awesome. And like anytime a band gets to just like go all out on late night, like it's awesome. Like I know it's funny, on the album the song is not nearly as good, but there is a performance by the White Stripes on Late Night of the song, I think, Let's Build a Home, and I think another song. And what happens is they're playing and it's high energy and all this and that. I know Conan is a huge fan of the White Stripes, and I think they were on that entire week, and this was their Friday night performance. And Jack is playing the guitar, and what Jack does is he walks over to Conan's desk, throws the guitar down on the desk, and starts doing like a slide guitar solo with the guitar laying on the desk. And then when he tries to walk back to where they're supposed to be performing, the cable on the guitar gets stuck on like the desk or the chair. So he just drops the guitar and walks back to the microphone, and the performance ends with just Meg playing the drums and him singing whatever's left. That's cool. it's such a like chaotic performance.
Yeah.
But it's so cool to see them get to do that on late night. And Conan loves it because it's his favorite band using the set that he uses 5 days a week as a prop for their performance. And so he loved it, seeing that. I remember when Slayer performing on Jimmy Kimmel. I think Gwar has been on like the Tonight Show. Like it's great anytime you see these bands on a late night show. So yeah, being someone who loved Conan O'Brien, watched every single episode of the 7-month run of the Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien, I saw this performance. At some point, Lips is yelling into the pickup of his guitar and like using that as a microphone.
That's cool.
It's so fucking cool. He like walks up, I think he walks up like the steps in the crowd and everything. It's such a cool performance. And like I said, at the time, the music wasn't what I was looking for. I could feel the energy, but the music wasn't what I was looking for. And so it was very easy for me all these years later to go back and be like, yeah, these guys actually are for me.
Yeah. So Chris is going to get sort of a double whammy vindication here. Both bands that are just acronyms. And the second band is AFI. And Chris... I'm glad that I know that they have older, punkier sounding stuff now, because I grew up with AFI being like the Leaving song.
Yeah.
And those songs that I did not like. And, Miss Murder, which I know is like you're sort of also on the fence with.
Yeah.
And so to have heard that they had older, punkier, like hardcore-ish type stuff was cool to go back and listen to and discover, and hearing their cover of Halloween by the Misfits.
Yep.
But what I was surprised to find was how much I liked the song Silver and Cold. And this song is, again, similarly as with Him, where I'm like, I should like this. Why don't I like this? I still think it's Davey's voice that I don't love, but the song as a whole actually works very, very well. From a songwriting perspective, from just the ebb and flow of the way that the song starts out, and then you've got like these really cool arpeggiated guitars throughout the verse, and then the big chorus with the with the gang vocals and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, this I could see as being like if they had stayed a hardcore band, this would be like the one emotional song that they have where everyone rushes the stage, jumps over the barricade, gets onto the stage and just grabs the mic, and sings their part during the chorus. And so, this was one of the ones that I was a little bit more ashamed of, like having to admit to you and be like, yeah, this AFI song is actually really good. Because the same way where for such a long time, like you were talking about with Fall Out Boy, I never showed AFI any love. I never heard anything that spoke to me for me to say like, oh yeah, they're actually really good. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
But I took all of that and turned it into fuck AFI. Like, I don't know. They suck, blah, blah, blah. It's, to me, they were very like indistinguishable from 30 Seconds to Mars. And they're actually very different.
Yes.
But
I resent that.
But at the time, that's very much the way that I felt.
Yeah.
So like now being able to go back and being like, yeah, this is actually, again, just right up my alley. This is exactly the type of stuff that I'm into. But I think it was because it came out during a time where you were either listening to AFI or you were listening to like Mudvayne.
Yeah.
It was one end or the other, and I was always at odds with the kids who were listening to AFI because, again, they would be like, oh, yeah, do you like Hawthorne Heights and Seosin? And I'm like, the fuck no, fuck off, get away from me. Again, gatekeeper, elitist, I wore that badge proudly. Not so much anymore. I definitely tried to make up for my past sins. Chris, what's the last band that you have as your second chance band? So
the last band I want to talk about, and it's something I wanted to make sure I brought up because in thinking of these bands, Anvil obviously is a metal band, but the other bands I've talked about, it's not metal. It's stuff that I like, but it's not something that I feel like truly fits of being like a second chance thrash metal band, which is what I was kind of looking for. Right. And there's a band that I have given dozens of chances and they disappoint me every time. That's Megadeth, And so even for this, I was like, I like High Speed Dirt in Brutal Legend. And there's a specific guitar part in Holy Wars, The Punishment Due, that I really like. Like in the middle, there's this riff. Like he does a cool thing that I really like. And then I'm listening to like Tornado of Souls because I always think I saw Megadeth twice on the same tour with Slayer where they were performing Rust in Peace in its entirety and Slayer was performing Seasons in the Abyss in its entirety. And both times Dave introduces the song, this is a song about the weather, and plays Tornado of Souls. And so You're telling me I'm going to have to hear him do that at fucking Jones Beach? I'm going to jump into the water. But so I listened to Tornado of Souls and like, the music is so fucking good. And then like the second his voice comes in, I physically recoiled when I heard this. like we make fun of his voice and sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's not as bad. This is the worst I've ever heard Dave. So like I wanted to at least bring up Megadeth because, I keep talking about it, how like Dave can write great thrash metal. If he would just shut his fucking mouth, Megadeth would be like the greatest thrash metal band ever. But he insists on singing and he sucks at it. Yeah. But there is a thrash metal band that I did give a second chance to because for whatever fucking reason I just didn't, probably because of the music I heard from them at the time. That's the band Flotsam and Jetsam.
All right.
This is a band that I remember the guy I did a radio show with in high school mentioning. And I don't know if he ever played them on the radio, but if he did, it didn't leave much of an impression on me. So then I'm going to a show. I believe this was the same show that Testament filmed their Dark Roots of Thrash DVD.
Okay.
Overkill was supposed to be there and ended up not being there because Bobby Blitz had pneumonia. I believe Death Angel was there, and Flotsam and Jetsam was there. And Flotsam and Jetsam at the time was supporting their new album, Ugly Noise, which, like, the title track is good, and the rest of the album has some good songs on it, and I kind of liked it, but, like, it didn't really do anything for me, especially since I'm there seeing fucking Death Angel. I wanted to see Overkill and Testament, who are, like, very thrashy, very aggressive. Ugly Noise wasn't really that. So even though I liked it, I didn't really give it a good opportunity.
Right.
Then as time goes on, I always hear people talking about Doomsday for the Deceiver and how it's one of the greatest thrash albums and all this and that. And I'm like, really? Flotsam and Jetsam? Like, I get it. I listened to their brand new stuff in 2012 and I didn't like it. And like I've been saying this entire episode, bands' new stuff, according to fans, is always worse than their old stuff.
Right.
So it took a while before I finally listened to Doomsday for the Deceiver. And when I finally did, it was once again, oh, I get it now. And, you know, I listened to this album, the title track, a song like Hammerhead. It's funny, they also have songs called Desecrator and Fade to Black, you know, which other bands have great songs by those titles, but the Flotsam and Jetsam songs with those titles are great as well. And this album is a solid thrash metal album. And again, this is something where it's like, why'd it take so long for me to find this? Because this is right. Exactly what I was looking for the entire time. And now I have it. I wish I had this the whole time. So right. It was interesting to take that approach. And like I said, I wanted to talk about like a thrash metal band, a band that was like, yes, this is a band that at the time I didn't give it a chance because its new music at the time was good.
Right.
But not exactly what I was looking for. And I was surprised to hear people refer to them as thrash. And I was surprised to see them on the same bill as Testament, Overkill, and Death Angel. And then later on realizing, oh, yeah, they belong. They 100% belong on that stage between these other bands because these guys rock really fucking hard. This is really good thrash metal. And so, yeah, I wanted to make sure I talked about Doomsday for the Deceiver.
I will tell you my thoughts as to why maybe it took us a lot longer to give Flotsam and Jetsam a chance than you would think, and it's because of Metallica. That's always been my opinion, is like you hear that Jason Newsted comes over from Flotsam and Jetsam, and it's like, oh, okay, so that must have been a lesser band.
Yeah.
And like, because I grew up, it feels like already knowing who Metallica was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you hear of Flotsam and Jetsam, it's like, okay, it's not anything that I need to check out because Jason Newsted's already in Metallica.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't think it was until I had seen like a music video of theirs on VH1 Classic or something like that during like their Headbanger hour.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is really fucking cool. Like, this is really, really good. And then you realize that Jason was actually the most metal one out of any of the guys in Metallica.
Yeah.
I think Jason Newsted himself has gotten a second chance from a lot of us.
Oh,
I think that during the time, like, yes, the records that they released during his tenure are not my favorite. I don't think that they're very many people's favorite albums. But there is no denying that the man knew how to put on a live performance.
Yes.
And he had so much heavy metal street cred that no one gave him credit for. Like, he was just out there giving it his all.
Yes.
He looked like he straight up just belonged in, like, Cannibal Corpse. The way that he performed and the intensity that he had. You know, especially back then, he had the shaved sides and back of his head and just the wavy long hair.
Yeah.
Like, such a cool look. He looked so much more metal than any of the other guys.
Oh yeah.
And like continued to be very in your face and very metal. Say what you will about Voivod and anything else that he's done since then, but at least during that time and during his tenure with Flotsam and Jetsam, they were putting out some great stuff. And if you have not given them a chance, if you have not listened to them, that is absolutely an endorsement from me. I approve of this message, Chris's message, that is. Yeah, go out, check out Flotsam and Jetsam too, because they are just phenomenal. But yeah, it's always just been my opinion that they got overshadowed by the fact that their bass player left and joined Metallica, which I think is fucking unfair, because
yeah,
they're really fucking good.
Yeah.
I forget what the name of the song. It might have been Desecrator. I heard it a little while ago on Sirius Radio while I was at work. I was like, "Oh, this song is really fucking good. Who is this?" And I throw I have the Shazam thing come up.
Yeah.
I'm like, Flotsam and Jetsam.
Flotsam and Jetsam. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, and there's plenty I could say about Jason Newsted, because it's my introduction to the band outside of I Disappear was new album with new bassist Rob Trujillo, a documentary where, he fucking left the band, So, my introduction to Jason Newsted is that he's a piece of shit who left the band. And then, I watch live videos, and like you're saying, he's rocking harder than any of them. He wanted to be early 80s Metallica again, and they just were not writing that music at all.
Yeah. Yeah, he was ready for it, and they just were like, nah, we're over it. We don't need to do that anymore. It's so fucking unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, how much, and this might be a weird conspiracy theory, but how much of that is that they ran out of Dave Mustaine riffs and the most musically talented of them had died in a car crash? That what the problem was? They ran out of...
We will go with yes.
They ran out of their... best songwriter wasn't in the band anymore, and they're they ran out of ideas.
Yeah. We'll go with that. Chris, I know that we sort of use Flotsam and Jetsam as a bit of a suggestion for you for this episode, but you've got an actual true suggestion for us, right?
Yes, indeed.
All right, why don't you go for it? Give us your suggestion for this episode.
So my suggestion for this episode is an album that I've talked about recently, and is an album that I believe I've talked about in the past as being an album that I needed to revisit more often because I often didn't give it a chance. And that's Slayer's second album, Hell Awaits.
Okay.
So much of the discussion about Slayer will be, the trilogy of albums, Rain and Blood, South of Heaven, Seasons in the Abyss. Mm-hmm. Arguably, their best music comes off of those three albums. Mm-hmm. I have also often talked about my love of their debut album, Show No Mercy, not the closing track, but the second to last track on the album, Cryonics, is a huge fan favorite. It's very much an Iron Maiden song. But kind of lost in the mix is their second album, Hell Awaits. There's only 7 tracks on the album. It's a little bit more experimental in terms of the sound and leans really heavy into the spooky Demons from Hell type of feel, but the music fucking rules. The title track is great. The song Kill Again is fantastic. At Dawn They Sleep, Necrophiliac, lots of great music, on this album. So that's why I suggest everyone make sure you check out and maybe give a second chance to Slayer's second album, Hell Awaits.
I love that we both went, this is a band that I absolutely love, that you would be surprised to find that I did not enjoy one of their albums as much as everybody else does. So here's the thing, is Slipknot is a powerhouse of a band, right? It's nine dudes from Iowa running around on stage, or they were 9 dudes from Iowa. But the album that everyone goes back to whenever they release a new album, and the thing that is constantly repeated is, this is another Iowa. This is going to be another Iowa. Are they going to write another Iowa? When are we getting Iowa 2?
Yeah.
That was lightning in a bottle. And there is an amount of rage and disgust and hatred that is on that album that can never be duplicated.
Yep.
Or at least there is on the first half of the album. And for the longest time, as soon as track 9 hit, I would say, nope, fuck this. I don't need to listen to the rest of this. Because as soon as Left Behind was done, I didn't want to hear anything else. As soon as the intro for The Shape would hit, I was like, nope, I'm out. So I literally, it's like 5 songs that I would just be like, I don't need to listen to this.
Yep.
That's The Shape, I Am Hated, Skin Ticket, New Abortion, Metabolic, and Iowa. In my opinion, I was like, the back half of their debut album is way stronger than the back half of this album, which is false. I've since proven myself wrong, gone back and listened to Iowa in full, which I never used to do. We're talking like 10, 15 years where I would be like, the intro to The Shape pissed me off, so I'm not listening to anything else on this. And I don't, this is what I mean by like, this is my my hyperfixation or just my trigger. I have things that, whether it's the rhythm, the melodic theme or whatever it is, if it hits me the wrong way, I'm not going to give the song a second chance. And thankfully, I gave the latter half of this album a second chance. They're solid songs. They're all really, really good. They're all just as aggressive as the songs off of the front end of this album. And they managed to make me eat my words because they're all very good. When you listen to the album all the way through, it is true what everyone says. It's a masterpiece of an album. It's something that's never going to be duplicated again. As much as we want them to, I think that the remaining band members would have to go to a very, very dark place that I'm sure none of them want to revisit in order to get back to that sort of aggression that they get off of Iowa. So that's my suggestion. Maybe it was more so a suggestion to myself because apparently that was a hot take. I was the only one who ever felt like the second half of Iowa sucked. So if you are like me and say, you know what, Iowa's not that big of a deal, give the album a second chance. Go back and check out Iowa, the last half of Iowa by Slipknot. Yeah, The Shape just starts out, and I would hear that and just be like, click. But it's just like this unison thing. They all come in for that one hit at the beginning, and then it's just the one guitar playing that riff. And again, if I'd given it like 10 seconds instead of 5, I would have heard the rest of the band come in, and then it actually gets going. And it's very, very good.
Yeah.
But that pissed me off enough to be like, nope, I'm writing the rest of this off.
Yeah, I get that.
Do I need my notes for this? No, I don't need my notes.
There's definitely been times where we're doing like a deep dive or something, and I hear a song, and I hear an intro, and I'm like, I do not like where this is going. Yeah. And I just skip it. I'll find a different band to talk about.
I hate that. Thanks for tuning into the Scrap Metal Podcast. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next episode.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night.